Welcome to this week's video tutorial for Virtual Racing School with the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup, which takes us to the unforgiving Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal. The lap I'll be looking at is driven by Rens Broekman in default late afternoon weather to match the official series. First I'll play the lap through in full before then going into further analysis. Okay, so that was a 1 minute 35.568. Okay, so as ever, to select the data pack from the VRS app, choose the Porsche iRacing Cup series as driven by Rens Broekman, and choose week 3, of course, Montreal. You can download the lap files, the replay and the setup. We're just going to click on Learn Track to load up the analyzer. Should start to play the lap through. We're going to pause it, it's already muted, and slow it down to half speed. So for those of you who might be new to this, you've got a steering angle trace up here as well as a speed trace across the duration of the lap, brake and throttle traces, and some live inputs as well. So we're going to select from the list of sectors at the top. We're going to select sector 1, which is the run from the start finish line to the braking zone for turn 1, which normally is pretty straightforward, but this circuit, it's a little bit different. So exiting the last corner from the previous lap, you'll want to be gradually bringing the car over to the left hand side of the circuit, so that you're quite close to the left hand side as you cross the start finish line. And then as we play this through, you want to bring the car gradually back over to the right hand side of the circuit, and that's going to give you a nice wide trajectory which will allow you to brake in a straight line for turn 1 without drifting away from the edge, because the circuit actually goes to the right here into the braking zone. So we'll just play that through, and we can see that we're going to brake shortly before this patch of tarmac on the right. We need to go to sector 2 just to see that. So braking just before this tarmac patch in a straight line, nice and hard, and you want to be bleeding off those brakes and turning in after this access road on the right here, looking for your apex, keeping those brakes on through the apex and using that curb on the inside. I'll just show you the car positioning there. The only thing that you need to worry about is dropping your wheels on the inside of this inside edge of the curb, because that can really unsettle the car. And then keep turning to the left, keep those brakes on to keep the front end loaded up, and then eventually when you're facing directly towards the apex for turn 2, that's when you want to straighten the car up and brake a little bit harder. So we can see that there, just braking a little bit harder, but then easing off the brakes again, slowing the car down. It's very important, if you want to pick up the throttle nice and early and to keep a tight line through the corner, that you slow the car down enough here. And that allows Rens to pick up the throttle really early here, before he's even facing this grandstand. And he's almost at full throttle, and he's still keeping a tight line. You can't get to full throttle yet because you're quite heavily traction limited in second gear, but we'll just see on the exit that he's hugging that curb all the way around and eventually reaches full throttle as this curb on the right hand side finishes. And then use all the track on the exit, but then try and take a direct route to the braking zone into the next chicane, where you're going to be braking just before the 2 marker here on the left. I would say roughly at the 2 marker actually, rather than before. Braking hard, keeping the car out wide, turning in quite late there, depending on how you look at it. But you do want to use a decent amount of curb here. Again, if you are going to drop your wheels over the inside edge of this curb, just be aware that it might unsettle the car. And notice how Rens again is holding those brakes all the way in the apex to keep the front end loaded up. With it being rear-engined, that's very, very critical in order to get the car to rotate well on the entry. And then Rens is picking up the throttle as he's on the curb, and then gradually increasing the throttle as the car lands, to set himself up nicely for the next one, where he's actually turning in really early for this one, and using a lot, well, he's going to use a lot of this next curb, which we'll see in sector 4. So yeah, using a lot of this next curb all the way on there, almost all 4 wheels over the white line in fact. But notice how Rens breathes out of the throttle in order to just keep the car nice and settled over that curb, in anticipation of the car being unsettled before then reaching full throttle for the exit. And he's actually at full throttle just before reaching the exit curb. And we'll see here actually on the exit that he gets really close to the wall, taking advantage of all of that curb. Obviously you don't want to overdo it and end up in the wall. Now approaching the fast sweeping right of 5, you want to be aiming for this curb on the left hand side to have a nice wide entry, completely flat out as you pass over that curb. But the most important thing here really is that you don't lift too late. So you will need to lift through here, can't make it through flat out, so you'll need to lift nice and early, which will allow you to get back on the power early and power through the corner. So just see that, aiming for that inside wall. Rens does play with the throttle there slightly on entry. I think that's just to unload the fronts and just push the car back out onto a slightly wider line. I guess he felt like he was just going to get a little bit too close to the wall on the inside there. Just be aware of that. But yeah, you should be able to pick up the throttle before this banner comes into view, and reaching full throttle before the circuit straightens out. And ideally you want to be able to keep the car not too far wider than the middle of the circuit to have a nice tight braking zone into turn 6, where you'll need to spot the end of this barrier on the left. There's a slight orange patch which is painted, and that's going to be your braking reference into 6. Braking hard, and notice how Rens has a trajectory here which takes him even wider. So he starts braking in the middle of the circuit, but he's aimed for the outside of the corner. So by the time he reaches his turn-in point, he's actually right at the edge of the circuit again, which really opens the corner up nicely. Important to not turn in too early here, Slow the car down enough, keep those brakes on all the way into the apex, and yeah, hooking up with the apex quite late, using a decent amount of curb here, and just picking up the throttle as he's on the curb, trying to keep nice and tight through here, and that will set him up nicely for the right-hander and the exit. He's not quite reaching full throttle before the right-hander, and then lifts again briefly before then on the curb. He's at that point trying to accelerate out of the corner, and notice that he's very, very patient with the throttle here in third gear on the exit. The car's really loaded up, cornering quite hard, and you'll notice on the exit there's just a little bit of a correction, which we can see more clearly in the steering for oversteer there. No need to use that curb on the left if you get your line right, and then just take a nice direct line to the next braking zone for the next chicane, which is going to be, you need to look for these markers on the left hand side again. It's going to be this number 3 marker, so you're going to brake nice and hard again under the bridge. Keep the, this is quite important, keep the car over to the left hand side under braking. There's actually a little bit of extra tarmac area, so you don't need to worry about dropping your wheels onto some grass, but you need to want to turn in as the grass begins again, and then you want to be aiming for this. This chicane has some really nasty tall white painted sausage curbs, much like the final chicane. Now the best line through here is to really take quite a big risk with that. So Rens is really aiming to use a lot of that curb, almost to straddle it, and the risk here is getting a penalty for doing so, but it's definitely the fastest way through here. So picking up the throttle as he's just apexing on that curb, but really quite measured, not using a lot of throttle, and really waiting for the car to settle. Really depends on how the car responds over that curb as to how much throttle you can apply. And then again, aiming for a bit less of the second curb this time, but still hooking up with the inside edge there. But yeah, bleeding out of the throttle on the exit, keeping a nice tight exit and picking up the throttle really early. And we'll see here that Rens gets really close to the wall here on the exit. Not too bad actually, that's fine. And then towards the braking zone for the hairpin, don't be tempted to turn in too soon. Keep the car out wide, which will allow you a nice straight trajectory under braking, and keep the car over to the left into the hairpin. So you've got a bunch of references here. You can use the 3 marker, the start of this wall, white painted wall, and also a tarmac area as well. So braking nice and hard in a straight line all the way down to second gear. Really got to get the car slowed down a lot before you turn in here, otherwise you overshoot. And it's quite a late apex, so yeah, really want to slow that car down and make sure you get the car back for a really late apex. You should be able to then pick up the throttle in the middle of the corner before you've actually apexed, if you get your line just right. And then the track does open out on the exit, but you shouldn't need to take full advantage of that. You should be at full throttle by now. And yeah, so Rens has at least a car's width or 2 there to spare on the exit, but then straight lining the opening. We'll just speed it up down towards the final chicane now, keeping the car in a nice straight line, gradually bringing it over to the left hand side and spotting this final bridge, which is going to be your braking zone into the last corner. So we're going to sector 10 for that. So yeah, braking just at the bridge, really, really hard. Hold those brakes on, and don't turn in too early. Wait for that 1 marker, that final 1 marker just here. and then turn in. And again, Rens is using a lot of this first tall curb and holding those brakes all the way into the apex. But notice how measured he is on the throttle, so he's not in a rush to pick up the throttle this time. And that's because the car can get really unsettled over that curb. It's probably going to take off as it did there briefly, and then as the car lands and recompresses, you should be able to get into the throttle quite aggressively. Just be aware of the line through the second half of the chicane. Avoid using as much of the second curb. That's quite important, and as a result Rens kind of feathers out of the throttle before then finally applying full throttle, and his line is really quite close to the wall here on the exit. You'll see, whoa, yeah, pretty close there, but that is the quickest way. And then yeah, to finish off the lap, gradually bring the car back over to the left hand side again to set yourself up with the best line into braking for turn 1. You can find all setups, replays and telemetry for your own use and analysis on virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-on-one tuition with top drivers from the likes of Commander Simsport. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.